Hey boys and girls, this is video number 9. We're counting them down here in the charts, and we're coming up with a short story summary today for a chart for the Scarlet Ibis. This is our third story, and today you should have a short story summary blank chart to take your notes on. I will just kind of be scrolling down through this chart, take the notes. Your title is The Scarlet Ibis. James Hurst is your author. Our setting is in the American South, and I told you the way the author described the place, I almost felt like I was at the Forrest Gump set, you know, with those trees with the moss growing down and things like that. This is back in 1918. We know specifically because of the end of World War I, and but just the setting of the whole time period, because he does reflect to Doodle being born all the way up until his 6th birthday. So there's a few years besides just 1918. So it's we know that's one of them, but early 1900s is a good setting as well. Don't forget, setting is not just the place, but also the time period of the story. That's very relevant to the story. The characters involved are Doodle. Please make sure you note that his name is William Armstrong, and what an awesome description as to his parents giving him this big name, this William Armstrong. The name only looks good on a tombstone is example of foreshadowing again. And but the William Armstrong being a big long name for such a little boy was like tying a big tail onto a small kite. Just some great description for the author here. The narrator's name I discussed in the last video remains anonymous. Would you want to have everybody know that you did this? I think the author's pouring his heart out, but he just doesn't want, or the narrator is pouring his heart out, and he doesn't want people to really maybe know his name. Mama, Daddy, Scarlet Ibis could be a character as well. Not speaking or thinking things, but definitely a great symbol. Aunt Nicey as well. Coming down into our conflicts here. I don't really think we have a supernatural type of conflict in the story, so we're going to stick with the man versus man. We know that Doodle versus the narrator, but it's Doodle versus almost the narrator's expectations for him. So make sure you add that in the conflicts of your portion of these notes. Man versus environment. We definitely have some environment here. And when we first think environment, I'm sure you get the family versus the storm, right? That definitely foreshadowed it. The hurricane that comes right after the drought, and just, you know, the crops are dying and withering. No foreshadowing again, but that physical environment that they're fighting against as family is relevant in the story. But also, if you have handicaps, that is indeed part of your environment. You know, your and so Doodle versus his handicaps, the struggle to overcome those things, is man versus his setting, his environments, his surroundings. Okay? Man versus self. People think like, isn't man versus self the Doodle versus his handicaps? It's not. Man versus self is an internal conflict. Okay, boys and girls? Internal conflict. That's an internal struggle. Make sure you understand that. So Doodle versus his handicaps is not a man versus self thing. That's where inside Doodle has desire to please his brother. That's an internal conflict. Narrator versus his feelings of guilt and shame, right? He's retelling the story, and that's an internal conflict. He starts to cry. The one point in the story where he's crying when his brother starts to walk and shows mom and daddy that he's walking. The fact that he's crying there is because he knows he taught him for the wrong reasons. He taught him out of his own guilt, out of his own pride and an embarrassment of having a brother who's handicapped. And because of that, the guilt is making him cry. We can see this is a huge internal conflict for our main character here. The plot summary, I'm just going to kind of read through it. You may pause if I start to scroll down too early, but start copying. This is the story of a man looking back on his memories of his younger brother named William Armstrong, nicknamed Doodle, who was born with physical limitations. And I know as soon as I start that plot summary and I say it is a story of a man, it throws people. But don't forget, the first page, 2 pages, were about this guy reflecting, turning back time, and telling us this story. Our main character is elderly now, or definitely grown. I think definitely a grown man, probably 60 years old, maybe 70 years old, who is who's thinking back to his younger brother. Okay, But anyway, William Armstrong, nicknamed Doodle, born with physical limitations. Doodle was pushed by his older brother to learn to walk and keep up with the other children. He tries hard for his brother, but his challenges hold him back. After a mysterious storm, a scarlet ibis falls from the family's tree and dies, foreshadowing Doodle's own tragic death. And I know that seems like that's pretty early in the story, but it foreshadows a death. I know there's a lot of other things that build up and great plot in there, but I mean that's a sufficient summary. It gets us to the point where we know that that bird dying will symbolize him later. So if you need to pause to continue to copying the plot summary, you may do so. But I'm going to scroll down to themes here now. And the theme of this story, there's just so many lessons to be learned, right? Recognize limitations, first of all. We all have limitations in our lives, whether it's a physical thing, a financial thing, struggles that we need to try to overcome, but at least recognize those limitations and know that they're there, that we all are not perfect. Okay? Big moral of the story. Themes are morals and lessons that we learn. What's the author trying to tell you through the story? That's a theme. Appreciate others. Appreciate your family, right? And it's like sometimes we just need to learn lessons on our own. We need to learn for ourselves. We will treat our sisters and our brothers poorly. Your parents did the same thing to their brothers and sisters. We write stories, we read literature so that hopefully we can learn from other people's mistakes. How tragic. I mean, I have so many students. This story is so sad. I can't believe it went that far. You realize and appreciate things when they're gone. And hopefully through reading literature, we realize these things before that. We make better choices. And you can just feel empathy for these characters rather than feeling the problem yourselves, right? So just appreciating others, appreciating your family, please, recognize that theme, learn it before you experience it yourself. Live life to the fullest. Definitely live every day. You don't know when that last day is here. I personally went through some major life changes in the past couple years, and you don't know when things are going to end. And that's one of the greatest parts of this story too, is that, our narrator pushed Doodle to his death. I understand that, and that's the guilt. But what type of life would Doodle have had without his brother, right? They live life every day the best they could, going to Old Blooming Swamp, spending time together as brothers, and I think that's really significant. It's relevant. Beware of pride. Pride is a great thing. It makes you a good person, but it can push you too far. We talked about that in the last video. And guilt is a powerful emotion. Think about this author. Boy, I mean, him just spilling his guts like this for us. Just a powerful emotion that makes someone able to write a story as this. Literary terms I want you to focus on, and we have been on the worksheet that we've been doing in class. All the literary devices, the ones that I really wanted to focus on, were definitely symbols for the story. An object, a person, or event that functions as itself but also stands for something more than itself. And the two greatest symbols in this story, obviously, the Scarlet Ibis and the bleeding tree. Foreshadowing, the use of clues to hint at events that will occur later in the story. And foreshadowing begins right at the beginning of the story, when the type of season it is, flowers dying, fall coming. At the end of the story we see that. The storm itself, definitely don't underrate a rain shower or a storm. When you see that in a story, that should be the author's trying to tell you something bad is coming here. The clouds were rolling in, they could see the storm coming, right? And as the author describes that, I felt something bad was going to happen. Illusion as well. This is a new one we just started to learn, but it's one that's important for 9th grade. You've got to grasp this one. A reference in a literary work to a person or place or thing in history, or even another work of literature. And we have great allusion to the resurrection in here. The resurrection of Christ is alluded to, as Aunt Nicey says, this thing you're showing me on Doodle's 6th birthday better be as good as the resurrection. And it was, because both are miracles, both are miraculous, and both are also rising. Doodle is rising up out of his chair, just the way that Christ is rising from the dead. So that allusion is twofold here. It's not just one little reference. There's usually multiple meanings, double meanings. It's deeper. Think deeper. Don't just look at things for the surface, okay? That's it for our lesson. Make sure you have these notes. They will help you on your unit test of short stories. Have a good night, boys and girls.